Chapter 1: The Diagnosis. I never imagined that a single visit to the doctor would change my life forever. One day, after months of feeling unusually weak and fatigued, I finally decided to seek medical advice. My wife, Emma, insisted on accompanying me. She had always been my rock, the one who kept me grounded when life seemed uncertain. The doctor's face was unreadable as he flipped through my test results. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson," he finally said. "It's cancer. Stage 3. A heavy silence filled the room. Emma squeezed my hand so tightly that it hurt, but I barely noticed. My mind was spinning. Cancer. The word alone felt like a death sentence. "What's the treatment plan?" Emma asked immediately. The doctor hesitated. "There is a promising treatment, but it's expensive. Your insurance won't cover it entirely." I already knew we weren't in a good financial position. The mortgage on our house was steep, and my small accounting job barely kept us afloat. The thought of being a financial burden to Emma crushed me more than the diagnosis itself. "I'll figure something out," I muttered. Chapter 2. A Sacrifice for Love. The next few days were a blur of hospital visits, calls to insurance companies, and discussions with financial advisors. The reality became painfully clear. There was no way we could afford the treatment without making a drastic decision. One night, Emma sat me down at the kitchen table. Her eyes were red from crying, but there was determination in her expression. "We should sell the house," she said. I froze. "What?" "It's the only way, Jack," she said. "We can rent a smaller place. Your health is more important than a house." It was a gut-wrenching idea, but she was right. I hesitated, but eventually I nodded. "Okay. If that's what it takes." The next morning, Emma wasted no time. She contacted a real estate agent, and within days we found a buyer. He was eager, willing to pay in full and in cash. It all seemed too good to be true. The deal was finalized quickly. I was too weak to handle the details, so Emma took care of everything. The day I signed the contract, she kissed me on the forehead and whispered, "Everything is going to be okay." I believed her. Chapter 3 vanished. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. Maybe it was the hope that treatment was now within reach. I called for Emma, but there was no response. I checked the bedroom. Her clothes were gone. The closet, usually overflowing with her dresses and sheers, was empty. A cold chill ran down my spine. I rushed to the living room, my hands shaking as I grabbed my phone. I dialed her number. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." Panic surged through me. I checked our bank account. The balance was zero. Every single dollar from the house sale was gone. Emma was gone. Chapter 5: Nowhere to go. The bank took swift action. With the mortgage gone but no funds to my name, I had mere days before I'd be forced to vacate the house. No money for treatment. No home. No wife. I reached out to friends, but most of them had their own problems. Some offered temporary shelter, but I couldn't bring myself to accept. I wasn't just homeless, I was a man stripped of everything. With nowhere to go, I found myself at a cheap motel, using the last bit of money in my wallet. The irony was cruel. I was dying, and yet my biggest concern now was simply surviving. That night, I lay on the stiff mattress, staring at the ceiling, my mind trapped in an endless cycle of questions. Why? How could she do this to me? Was any of it real? I needed answers. Chapter 6. The hunt begins. Grief turned into anger. I refused to let Emma vanish without a trace. I spent the next few days tracking down anyone who might have seen her. I visited her favorite coffee shop, her yoga studio, even her hairdresser. Nothing. It was as if she had evaporated. Then a breakthrough. One of Emma's old friends, Laura, mentioned something odd. She was acting weird the last few weeks. Kept talking about a fresh start. Said she was done living a boring life. A fresh start. That phrase burned into my mind. Had Emma always planned to leave? Had she only been waiting for an opportunity? I dug deeper. I went through our old texts, emails, anything that might give me a clue. And then I found it. A transaction Emma made just before disappearing. A first-class ticket to Mexico. I had my lead. Chapter 7: Chasing Ghosts. Mexico wasn't exactly next door. But I had nothing to lose. I sold my car, the last thing of value I owned, and bought a one-way ticket to Cancun. The moment I landed, the reality of what I was doing hit me. I had no plan. No backup. Just the sheer determination to find Emma and demand answers. I started by visiting hotels, showing her picture to staff. Most shook their heads. Some barely glanced at me. But finally, at a small beachfront inn, a receptionist's eyes flickered with recognition. "Yes, she was here," he said in broken English. "Stayed a few days. Left suddenly. No check out." "Do you know where she went?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "She left with a man." The air left my lungs. A man. Chapter 8. A name from the past. The receptionist couldn't give me much more information, just a vague description of the man Emma had left with. Tall. Dark hair. Well-dressed. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make my stomach turn. I knew someone who fit that description. Nathan. Nathan was Emma's ex-boyfriend. She had always spoken about him with a mix of nostalgia and resentment. He was the reckless, adventurous type, the opposite of me. A man who promised excitement but always let her down in the end. She told me she had cut ties with him years ago. But had she? If she was with Nathan, that meant this wasn't just some impulsive betrayal. She had been planning this for a long time. I clenched my fists. I had come too far to turn back now. Chapter 9. The trail heats up. I spent the next few days asking around, showing pictures of Emma and Nathan to locals. Most shook their heads, but then I got lucky. A bartender at a high-end club recognized them. "They were here 2 nights ago," he said. "Looked like they were celebrating." "Celebrating what?" I asked. The bartender smirked. "No idea. But they were spending big." I nodded numbly. "Yes. Please." Part 5. The taxi that vanished. Back at the resort, Oliver and I sat on the bed, laptop open, watching the footage over and over again. Every time the same thing happened. The woman me walked out, flagged down a cab, got in and left. "There's gotta be a way to find that taxi," Oliver muttered. "Maybe the driver remembers you." My fingers trembled as I reached for my phone. "I'll call the cab company." But when I did, the response made my stomach drop. "We don't have any taxis operating in that area around that time," the dispatcher said firmly. "Are you sure it was one of ours?" I glanced at Oliver, my heart racing. "Yes. It was yellow, had your logo on the side. The security footage shows it." The woman on the other end of the line hesitated. "Ma'am, I don't know what to tell you, but our system doesn't show any pickups in that location today." I hung up, my blood running cold. The taxi didn't exist. Or at least it shouldn't have. Oliver and I sat in silence, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. Then he spoke. "Sophie, what if it wasn't a taxi?" I stared at him, my pulse pounding in my ears. "Then what was it?" He hesitated. "I don't know. But what if it didn't take someone else pretending to be you?" He looked at me, eyes dark with something close to fear. "What if it took you?" Part 6. The gap in my memory. Oliver's words sent a chill through me. What if it took me? No. That was impossible. I had been at the store. I had been waiting. I had proof. My phone calls, my texts. The way my battery drained as I desperately tried to reach Oliver. And yet, the footage told a different story. A story where I had left. I swallowed hard. "You're saying that I was taken? But I'm here, Oliver. I never left." Oliver ran a hand through his hair. "But what if you did? What if something, I don't know, replaced you?" I scoffed, trying to ignore the icy fear creeping into my bones. "That's insane." "Is it?" He turned the laptop toward me, rewinding the footage to the exact moment where I got into the taxi. "Watch closely." I leaned in, my heart hammering. At first, everything seemed normal. The woman, me, moved naturally, stepped into the taxi like any other person would. But then, just before the car door closed, something shifted. For the briefest second, the image flickered. The figure inside the cab blurred. It was as if her face lost definition, her body turning into a distorted smear of light and shadow. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. The taxi drove off. I jerked back from the screen. "No. That's just a glitch in the footage." Oliver didn't look convinced. "What if it's not?" I shook my head violently. "No. I'm me, Oliver. Nothing happened to me." But I wasn't so sure anymore. Because if that wasn't me in the taxi, then where had I really been? Part 7. The dreams. That night, I barely slept. When I did, I dreamed. I was standing on the side of the road waiting. The world around me was silent. No cars. No wind. The sky was too dark, the stars too bright. Then headlights appeared in the distance. A taxi, identical to the one in the footage, rolled toward me. But something was off. The windows were too dark, like deep, endless voids. The driver's face was shadowed, his features blurred. I wanted to run, to move, but my feet were glued to the ground. The door opened. A hand reached out. And then, I woke up gasping. Oliver stirred beside me. "Sophie? What's wrong?" I couldn't answer. My heart was racing, my skin clammy with sweat. Because for a moment, just a fleeting, horrible moment, when I opened my eyes, I wasn't sure where I was. Or who I was. Part 8, The Wrong Reflection. The next morning I felt strange. Off. Like my body was slightly out of sync with itself. I chopped it up to stress and exhaustion. But when I went into the bathroom and looked into the mirror, a deep unease crawled up my spine. Something wasn't right. I leaned in closer. My face stared back at me. Same brown eyes, same slightly chapped lips, same faint scar on my chin from when I fell as a kid. But the longer I stared, the more I felt watched. Not in a normal, "I'm looking at myself in the mirror" way. No. It was as if the reflection was looking at me. I exhaled shakily, reaching up to touch my cheek. My reflection did the same, perfectly mirroring me. Of course it did. It was just a mirror. And yet, I turned my head slightly, just a tiny, almost imperceptible fraction of a second. And in that moment, I could have sworn, that my reflection didn't move at the same time. It was just the briefest delay, a fraction of a second. But I saw it. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering. No. Iwisparet. That's not possible. I squeezed my eyes shut, took a deep breath, and looked again. Everything was normal. I let out a nervous laugh, shaking my head. "You're losing it, Sophie." But deep inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. That I wasn't quite the same person I was before. Part 9, The Man in the Hallway. For the rest of the day, Oliver kept a close eye on me. He didn't say it out loud, but I could tell. He was watching me like I might disappear again. I didn't blame him. That evening, as we were heading to dinner, I stopped in the hallway of the hotel. Someone was standing at the far end. A man. He was tall, wearing a dark coat. I couldn't see his face clearly, but something about the way he stood, completely still, shoulders squared, sent a wave of unease through me. "Sophie," Oliver called from ahead. I turned to him. "Do you see that man?" Oliver frowned, looking in the direction I was pointing. "What man?" I snapped my head back toward the hallway. The man was gone. A chill raced through my veins. My mouth went dry. Never mind. But as we walked away, I felt a strange crawling sensation on the back of my neck. Like someone was still watching. Part 10, The Taxi Returns. "Fine," he said. "One hand. Winner takes all." Chapter 15, The Gamble. We sat at a private poker table. Nathan's hands were shaking. He needed this win. I played it cool, letting him think he had the upper hand. He pushed in his watch, his car keys, and finally, his hotel key card. "All in," he said, his voice dripping with overconfidence. I smirked. Exactly what I wanted. The dealer flipped the final card. I won. Nathan went pale. No. No, this can't be." I grabbed the hotel key from the table. "Pleasure doing business with you." As I stood to leave, he reached for me, his face red with rage. "You think this is over?" I leaned in close, my voice calm. "Oh, Nathan, this is just getting started." Chapter 16. Face to face again. I arrived at their hotel suite in the early hours of the morning. My heart was pounding, but I was ready. I swept the keycard and stepped inside. The suite was massive, dripping in luxury, all paid for with my money. And there, sitting on the bed, was Emma. She looked up, half asleep, and then pure panic filled her eyes. "Jack," she whispered. I took a slow step forward, watching as she clutched the sheets around her. "Surprised to see me?" She didn't answer. Instead, her eyes darted to her purse on the nightstand. I followed her gaze, already knowing what she was thinking. "Looking for this?" I held up her passport and wallet. "Yeah, you're not running this time." She swallowed hard. "Jack, listen, save it." I dropped into the chair across from her. We both know how this works. You're a liar, Emma. And a damn good one. Tears welled up in her eyes. I had no choice. I laughed coldly. Don't insult me. You had plenty of choices. And you chose yourself. She was silent. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to transfer every last cent back to me. Right now. Her lips trembled. I don't have all of it anymore. My jaw tightened. Then you'd better hope Nathan does. She hesitated, then nodded. Okay. I'll do it. And she did. Right there on her phone. She transferred everything left in her accounts. More than half of what she stole. It wasn't all of it. But it was enough. Chapter 17, The Final Goodbye. I stood at the doorway, watching as Emma sat there broken, staring at the empty space where all her stolen wealth used to be. She finally looked up. Do you hate me? I thought about it for a long moment. Then I shook my head. No, I said. I just don't care anymore. And with that I walked away. Epilogue. Moving on. It took time, but I rebuilt my life. The money I got back helped me start fresh. I found a good doctor, got treatment, and slowly, piece by piece, I became myself again. As for Emmy and Nathan, Nathan disappeared, probably drowning in debt somewhere. And Emma? I never looked her up. I didn't need to, because for the first time in my life, I was finally free. Chapter 18, A New Game Begins. Getting my money back should have been the end of it. I should have moved on, built a new life, and never thought about Emma and Nathan again. But something inside me had changed. I had spent my whole life being the nice guy, the one who followed the rules, who believed in love, trust, and loyalty. And where had it gotten me? Broke, betrayed, nearly dead. I wasn't that man anymore. And if the world wanted to play dirty, then I would become the best damn player there was. Chapter 19, The Mentor. With half my fortune gone, I needed a way to rebuild. But working a regular job? That wasn't enough anymore. I had seen how real money moved, the kind that never touched a bank, the kind that could vanish overnight. And I wanted in. So I started where all criminals start, connections. Through a few risky conversations, I found my way into an underground gambling ring in Mexico City. It was run by a man named Santos, a former banker who had turned to high-stakes fraud after the system screwed him over. I watched him work, rigging games, laundering cash, manipulating people like chess pieces. And then one night, I sat across from him at the poker table and said, "Teach me." He laughed at first. "You? The guy who got robbed by his own wife?" I smirked. "Exactly. That means I already know what it feels like to lose everything. Which makes me dangerous." Santos leaned back, considering. Then he tossed a deck of cards onto the table. "Let's see what you've got." That was my first test. And I didn't lose. Chapter 20, The Transformation. Under Santos's guidance, I learned everything. How to read people, how to manipulate greed, how to create illusions so convincing that people would beg to give me their money. I started small. Rigging bets, playing dumb at casinos, tricking rich tourists into thinking they could outsmart. Then I moved on to bigger cons, fake investments, identity scams, even art fraud. Within 6 months, I had not only recovered my lost fortune, I had tripled it. But I wasn't done yet. There was still unfinished business. Chapter 21, The Setup. Nathan and Emma thought they had escaped, but they had no idea who they had created. Through some careful digging and a few well-placed bribes, I found them living in Dubai, enjoying their new life with what little money they had left. Emma had moved on to another rich businessman. Nathan, as expected, was drowning in gambling debts. And debts? Debts could be bought. So I did. Through a shell company, I purchased every single loan Nathan had taken from private lenders. Within weeks I owned him. And it was time to collect. Chapter 22, The Fall of Nathan. Nathan was sweating when he walked into the dimly lit VIP lounge of the Dubai casino. He thought he was meeting with some Arab investor willing to clear his debts. Instead he found me. His face turned ghostly white. "You?" "Me," I said, sipping my whiskey. "Long time no see." He tried to run, but 2 large men blocked his path. "My men." I gestured to the seat across from me. "Seat." Nathan obeyed. I slid a folder across the table. "These are all the debts you owe. And guess what? I own them now. He swallowed hard. I can get the money. I chuckled. No, you can't. But that's okay, Nathan. Because I'm giving you a way out. He looked up desperate. Anything. Name it. I leaned in. You're going to ruin Emma. Chapter 23. The Final Betrayal. Nathan didn't hesitate. His survival instinct was stronger than his loyalty. Over the next few weeks, he did exactly what I told him to do. He fed Emma's new billionaire boyfriend lies, whispers of her past scams, proof that she was using him, even some fake police records I had made just for the occasion. It worked. One night, Emma was thrown out of her penthouse screaming, begging, with nothing but the clothes on her back. She had no money, no friends, no escape. And then, as she sat alone in a cheap motel, she got a knock on the door. She opened it. And there I was. Chapter 24. The Last Goodbye. Emma's eyes widened. Jack. I smirked. Surprised. She backed away. Dudley, what do you want? I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. I wanted to see how it feels, Emma. To have everything taken away. Tears welled up in her eyes. I was wrong. I held up a hand. Save it. She sniffled. So what now? Are you going to destroy me completely? I tilted my head thinking. Then I pulled out a single envelope and placed it on the table. Inside was $5,000 in cash and a one-way plane ticket to anywhere she wanted. Her lips parted in shock. Why? I shrugged. Because I already won. You're nothing now. And I'm not going to waste my time on nothing. She stared at the envelope, then at me. Do you still love me? I really laughed. Then I walked to the door, looked over my shoulder and said, I don't even remember who you are. And with that I left. For the last time. Epilogue: The Kingmaker. Nathan disappeared after that. I heard he was last seen working for a drug lord to pay off his remaining debts. Emma? Who knows? Maybe she took the money and started over. Maybe she tried to scam someone else. But it didn't matter. As I had changed the game. No longer the victim. No longer the fool. I had become something much, much more dangerous. And as I sat in my luxury penthouse, sipping the finest whiskey, watching the world burn below me, I knew one thing for sure. I would never be powerless again. Chapter 25. The offer I couldn't refuse. I should have walked away. I should have let it all go. But once you get a taste of power, the kind that lets you control people like puppets, the kind that turns kings into beggars, you don't just stop. And then came the offer. A man named Viktor Petrov, Russian billionaire, ex-KGB, now one of the most powerful shadow figures in the world, invited me to a meeting in Monaco. I wasn't stupid. You don't refuse a man like Petrov. So I went. And that was the night my life changed forever. Chapter 26. Playing with Giants. The meeting was held on a super yacht, docked just outside Monte Carlo. Armed guards everywhere. Inside, the real players of the world: oligarchs, crime bosses, corrupt politicians. Petrov sat at the center, sipping vodka like a king surveying his court. He gestured for me to sit. Jack Thompson, he said in a thick accent. I've heard of you. Played it cool. All good things, I hope. He chuckled. You destroyed 2 con artists in 6 months, tripled your stolen fortune, and humiliated some very powerful people along the way. I like that. I stayed silent, waiting for him to get to the point. Petrov leaned in. How would you like to play on a bigger stage? I raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. He smirked. Good. Because the real game? It's just beginning. Chapter 27. The Job. Petrov had a problem. A rival of his, Lorenzo De Luca, a ruthless Italian businessman, had been running an international money laundering operation through casinos. Petrov wanted his empire to collapse. And I was the man to make it happen. You're a gambler, Petrov said. A manipulator. A strategist. I need someone who can break him from the inside. I sipped my whiskey. And what's in it for me? Petrov smiled. $50 million. I let out a slow breath. That was real power money. The kind that could put me above kings. I looked at Petrov and nodded. Deal. Chapter 28. Becoming the Ghost. I spent the next 3 months disappearing. No more Jack Thompson. I became Alexander Graves, a high-stakes gambler, former Wall Street prodigy, now a globe-trotting investor. With my new identity in place, I infiltrated Lorenzo's world. It was easy. These men all had one fatal flaw: ego. I played the part perfectly. Rich, arrogant, reckless. I let myself lose big at Lorenzo's casino, pretending to be just another dumb millionaire chasing a win. And just like that, he trusted me. Chapter 29: The Heist Without Guns. Lorenzo brought me into his inner circle, thinking I was his next big investor. What he didn't know: I was feeding everything to Petrov: account details, illegal transactions, even the secret offshore accounts he used to hide his billions. And then when the moment was right, we made our move. One night, as Lorenzo partied on his private island, Petrov's hackers wiped out every dollar in his accounts. His empire? Gone in seconds. By the time Lorenzo realized what had happened, his own men had turned against him, thinking he had set them up. I watched from the shadows as his world burned, and I felt nothing. Chapter 30. The Wise of a King. Petrov kept his word. $50 million. Wired to an account under my new name. "You're a natural," he told me, shaking my hand. "I could use someone like you." I thought about it for a long moment. Then I smirked. "I'm not interested in working for you, Victor." His expression darkened. "Be careful, Jack." I leaned in. "No, you be careful. Because you just trained your biggest competitor." I turned and walked away, feeling his eyes burn into my back. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. Epilogue. The ultimate game. I vanished from the world again. Richer than I ever imagined. But money was just the scorecard. The real game was power. And I was going to play it better than anyone. Because I had learned the ultimate truth. Trust is a weakness. Love is a lie. And the world belongs to those willing to take it. I smiled, watching the city lights from my penthouse. Then I picked up my phone and made the first call. It was time to build an empire. Chapter 31. The empire begins. I had the money. I had the connections. Now I needed a kingdom. Petrov controlled Eastern Europe. The Italians ran their casinos. The Americans had Wall Street. But no one had a global ghost network. One that could manipulate stock markets, rig high-stakes gambling, and launder billions across countries without a trace. That's what I was going to build. And my first move? Recruiting the best in the game. Chapter 32. The team. I needed people who were as ruthless as me. So I found them. Small Blue Diamond: Liam Cross. A former MI6 operative who specialized in blackmail and intelligence leaks. If someone had a secret, Liam could find it and use it. Small Blue Diamond: Sophia Wren. An underground hacker who had once stolen $500 million from a Hong Kong bank and vanished without a trace. She could make money disappear or multiply at will. Small Blue Diamond: Dante Russo. An expert in casino manipulation. He could rig a game so subtly that even the house wouldn't notice. Until it was too late. Small Blue Diamond: Elena Volkov. An ex-lover of Petrov's, who knew all his hidden accounts and weaknesses. She wanted revenge. I gave her a purpose. Together, we weren't just a team. We were a revolution. Chapter 33. The First Target. We started small. A luxury casino in Macau was laundering millions for corrupt politicians. They thought they were untouchable. We emptied their vaults in one night. Sophia hacked the security. Dante rigged the games. Liam blackmailed the casino owner. Elena made sure the police were looking the other way. By morning, the casino was bankrupt. And every politician involved was exposed in the media. We didn't just steal money. We sent a message. And the world started paying attention. Chapter 34. The War with Petrov. I knew Petrov wouldn't let me walk away without a fight. And I was right. One night, I found a bullet on my hotel bed. No note. No message. Just a warning. A week later, one of my offshore accounts was frozen. Then, one of my informants was found dead in Istanbul. Petrov was making his move. So I made mine. Chapter 35. Turning the tables. I knew Petrov's biggest weakness. He trusted no one. So I made him doubt his own people. Liam spread rumors that his right-hand man was betraying him. Elena leaked false financial reports that made Petrov think his own empire was collapsing. Dante arranged a fake assassination attempt, making Petrov think someone inside his circle was trying to kill him. Within a month, his organization was tearing itself apart. And he didn't even know I was behind it. Then I made my final move. I personally wired $10 million to a mercenary group. And one night, as Petrov sat in his penthouse, his own men turned on him. By morning he was gone. And I had taken everything. Chapter 36, The Ghost King. With Petrov out of the way, the world was mine to control. Stock markets? I could crash them with a single phone call. Casinos? They worked for me now. Banks? They laundered my money, and they didn't even know it. And no one even knew my name. To the world, I was just a ghost. A whisper in the shadows, controlling billions with a simple flick of my wrist. No face. No trail. No weakness. Until she came back. Chapter 37, The Return of Emma. I was in Tokyo when Liam walked into my suite, holding a file. "You're not gonna believe this," he said, tossing it onto my desk. I opened it. And there she was. Emma. She had resurfaced in London, working with Interpol. My ex-wife, the woman who had ruined me, was now working with the very people hunting me down. I chuckled. Of course she is. Liam raised an eyebrow. Want me to handle it? I shook my head. No. Not yet. I leaned back, smirking. Let's have a little fun first. End.